What's up everyone, welcome back to the channel and to another 3D model. This week, we are going to be making a utility tool. Now I'm not going to lie to you, the last few weeks have been insanely busy, and this week was no different. I honestly wasn't even sure if I had enough time to get a YouTube video in this weekend. Now of course I didn't want that to happen, so we are going to do things a little bit differently. I thought it would be fun and challenging to put a time limit on the whole modeling process. So at the beginning of this video, we are going to start a timer, and when the 2-hour time limit hits, we are going to wrap up the modeling. So of course, we're going to make just one mesh for this model. I'm going to use subdivision modeling to create a higher poly model. And there's going to be no exceptions. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of things I wish I could add to the model, but whenever that time limit hits, we are going to just go on to the UV mapping process. Now to help speed up this whole process, we are also going to be using image planes. So I decided to jump on Google Images and find a few random images of utility tools. That way we can import those images into Maya and it can help speed up the whole blocking out stage. So these are a few of the images I decided to choose off Google, and not only is it going to help with the whole blocking out of the main utility shape, but it's also going to help with all the different blades and tools that the whole knife or utility tool comes with. Now we really don't have a lot of time for this week's video, so let's jump into it. So the first thing to do was import that image plane I found on Google Images, and then I can insert a cylinder and start blocking out that top main shape. Now I really wasn't sure which direction I wanted to go in the sense of details on this utility tool. I know we only have a few hours to get the modeling done, so I didn't want to make things too complex, but I also didn't want it to be very plain and boring. So you see throughout this whole process, I end up actually changing a few things up. I made a rectangular kind of cutout, a boolean into the main blade handle shape. And I decided just to remove that and add a more triangular shape later on. So I started with keeping the model fairly plain, and then depending on how much time I have left in this 2-hour limit, I decided to add a little bit more detail to it. Now, of course, this video is going to be sped up a little bit for the YouTube video, but if you're interested in seeing it in real time, it will be available on my Patreon page, along with all the working files like the Substance Painter file and the 3D model. So if you want access to any of that, you can find it all in the link in the description below. So let's not waste any more time here. Let's continue blocking out these main shapes, and let's make a utility tool. Alright, so before we jump into those UVs, I just quickly want to give a shout out to this week's video sponsor, PCBWay. PCBWay offers a variety of services ranging from PCB production, sheet metal fabrication, injection molding, 3D printing, and much more. You can quickly upload your own files and get a quote immediately. So if you're building something at home or want to print one of your own 3D models, PCBWay makes it extremely easy to get custom parts for your projects, even if you don't have the necessary tools. They take care of everything so you can get those parts shipped directly to your front door. So if you're working on a project or need 3D printing or any of these other services, make sure to check them out in the description below. And once again, thank you PCBWay for sponsoring this week's video. Alright, so here is the utility tool in its finished form. Now as you can see, I decided to add a smoothing effect to all of these meshes, just to smooth them out and create some nice curvature. Now of course, I feel like I could have done a little bit better on the topology and some of these booleans, but we really didn't have a lot of time on that 2-hour limit, so it is what it is. Now what I decided to do was split this utility tool into 2 different groups for the 2 different textures I have applied. So on the very first group are basically all of the tools on this actual utility tool. So all of the knives, the nail file, the can opener, the scissors, and all of these ones. It basically just did one seam right up the side to split them into 2 different UV shells for each tool. And on the other group is everything else. So the main actual handle and the top plier piece of this utility tool. Now originally, if you're watching on the Patreon video, I originally had these all sharing the exact same UV space, all of these main handle pieces. But I noticed when I quickly jumped into Substance Painter how you could see a lot of repeating patterns on both of the handles. So what I decided to do was keep these 2 actually overlapping and these 2 as well. That way when you're looking at it on one angle, you wouldn't see a repeating pattern on each handle. So I just had to go back and quickly shift some of these UV shells around, but it's pretty straightforward. Now of course I tried to take advantage of my 0:1 space on my UV editor just to maximize my resolution on all of these UV shells so I can have the most resolution on my textures. And I also enlarged a few of the more important shells. So for example, this shell up here, I didn't actually add that teeth pattern into the geometry. I thought we could just add that directly into the material in Substance Painter. So I actually enlarged these ones just a little bit bigger than the others. That way I can get a little bit more detail since I knew I wanted to have those lines on this piece of mesh. Other than that, everything else is pretty straightforward. Now I also added one more, so it's basically the exact same mesh, but I decided just to duplicate it and fold it up. That way I can have a few renders of the whole tool just folded together. And that was pretty straightforward as well. I just basically changed the pivot point to one of these screws, and then I could just basically grab one of these and just move it out. So I can fold it all up and then have a nice render. Now, of course, I probably could have spent a bit more time in making this a bit more realistic in the sense of how it folds together, but I think this works. You're not really going to get too close to these details, and I think this works. So all I have to do now is basically add a different texture to each of my groups so I can have 2 different texture sets in Substance Painter, and then we can jump over to Painter and start applying materials. Now, of course, this one's gonna be a little bit tricky because it's all metal, so we'll worry about that when we jump over to Substance Painter, but it's also gonna help speed up the whole texturing process because there's not too many complex details when it comes to this utility knife. It's all metal, so it should be hopefully pretty straightforward. All right, let's not waste any more time. Let's export this utility tool and let's jump over to Substance Painter. All right, so now jumping over to Substance Painter, we can go ahead and load in that FBX file from Maya. Now, like I mentioned, this is a pretty straightforward model when it comes to textures. If you're looking at those reference images we were using from Google, everything is just metal. A lot of the metal is actually the exact same, which in my opinion can look a little bit boring. Obviously it's clean, like a brand new utility tool, but I thought we would add a tiny bit more detail to some of these pieces. So what we're gonna do is really take advantage of those smart materials that come with Substance Painter. It's really gonna help speed up this whole process since we have a limited time on the whole texturing. And rather than applying the same material to everything, which can look a little bit boring, we're going to use a few different variations of metals or change a few different colors and roughness values on different blades. That way they can look slightly different from one another. Now, of course, we'll have to experiment a little bit. We are just diving into this and start texturing. So we're just gonna start filling in random meshes with random metal materials, and then we can start refining them as we go. Now, don't forget, you can find this whole video in real time, which will be available on my Patreon page, and you can find the link to it in the description below. All right, let's not waste any more time. Let's start filling in these meshes with materials, and we can start texturing our utility tool. All right, and that's basically everything. That is whole 3D modeling, UV mapping, and texturing process that I did to create this utility tool. I know this week's video was a little bit quicker than usual, but it was also a lot of fun to make, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. And if you did, please hit that like button, and also please consider subscribing to the channel. And don't forget, you can find this full video with all the working files on my Patreon page, which you can find in the link in the description below. And Patreon is also the best way to help support my work. So if you like these types of videos and you want to see more YouTube videos and tutorial-based videos, please go check out my Patreon page. And as always, I want to give a massive thank you to all my Patreons. I really can't thank you all enough for your continuous support. It goes such a long way in helping support my page. So thank you for being here and supporting my art. All right, let me know what you think about this week's model, and I will catch you all in the next one.